Welcome to the This Week I'm Into podcast. I'm your co-host, Pete Tyler. This week we have Paul's friend from high school, Evan Peng, on later to talk about his passion of esports. But right now I'm with my friend and co-host, Paul Invergulio. Paul, how are you doing?
I am doing really well, Hans. I've spent the last probably 9 hours watching the League of Legends World Championship to prepare for this.
Yeah, right. That was only to prepare for the podcast. That has nothing to do with the fact that you just wanted to watch 9 hours of media.
For sure. Yep. I'm that Sunday football boyfriend, but in a completely different way.
You're that Sunday esports boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a new niche of boyfriend now. So, well, Paul, usually I start with jumping in like, Paul, what's your experience with this topic? But I want to switch it up. Paul, I want to know, when was the last time you played a video game?
Yesterday.
Yesterday?
Yeah, I play a lot of video games, Hans.
And what did you play?
Probably League of Legends.
League of Legends, and you're gonna go pro with it, is that right?
No, I'm really bad at League. Actually, I did try to do a pro tournament in Counter-Strike. I used to be pretty good at Counter-Strike, which is like a shooting game.
Mm-hmm.
We joined a tournament that if you did well enough, you could qualify into like the major tournament. Like if you actually won enough games.
Mm-hmm.
We were one game away from having it streamed on Twitch.
Oh, shit. Okay. Wait. Yeah, I've heard of your experience with CSGO before, which is the shooting game, Counter-Strike, that Paul's talking about. You want to just hop into it? What is your experience with esports in general, with video games, with competitive video games?
Yeah, Lord, this is probably the episode that I could have done as my hobby.
Yeah.
So I could probably talk for a while, but I'll try to keep it short. So Evan is probably one of the reasons that I play video games, to be completely honest with you, because in high school, I never really played PC games, and we used to play Counter-Strike Source after class on our school laptops. But yeah, I play a lot of video games, but I probably played Counter-Strike all of high school, and then I've been probably playing League of Legends as like my main games, like main competitive-y games since. I was pretty good at Counter-Strike. Like I was saying, we played a tournament where you could qualify for like the major, which is like at the time like the highest level tournament, right? Assuming you won enough games, you could theoretically qualify. And just like, well, a lot of informal nonsense that was like way less serious. But other than that, then I've watched so many hours of Counter-Strike and League of Legends pro content. I don't even know how to quantify it. For a quantity, Hans, do you want to guess? I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but do you want to guess about how many hours I have on Counter-Strike? I only say that instead of League because I can look this up.
Okay, I bet you have, let's see, you played it a lot, I get the feeling. So I'm going to guess you have 2,500 hours logged on Counter-Strike.
Hans, I've probably played over 3,000 hours at least.
Okay.
Which I don't know what that means in terms of, you know, what I should have been doing with my life, but I would say for at least a couple hours every day in high school, I probably played this game. I think I peaked at top 5, maybe 5% of players, which obviously like there's a lot of people who play, so that's not like incredibly impressive.
No, but considering the population that does play, you're better than quite a few people.
Yeah, that's definitely one of those ones that they were just like, okay, that I don't know if I'm proud or embarrassed to give out those numbers.
Can we take just a quick step back, Paul? Because I think if to some people this is going to be very unfamiliar, and we're going to need to provide a background for what any of this means.
Oh,
so could
true.
you just let someone who doesn't know how you would explain League of Legends, CSGO, and esports in general?
Yeah, so in short, Counter-Strike is a 5v5 shooting, like a tactical shooting game, where you have teams of 5 and you basically are trying to kill the other players or take some sort of objective. League of Legends is very similar, but it's a MOBA, which stands for Multiplayer Online Battle Arena. Pretty much the same thing, but instead of shooting, you have other mechanics, right? Doesn't really matter what the specifics are. And so esports is essentially just like that at the top tier. So if you can imagine, like, you know, your Pee Wee football players, right? That's basically what I am, just people who play for fun.
No, come on. You're at least varsity. You're high school varsity at least.
In some games, maybe. In some
I'm
other games,
puny.
I truly just play casually now. But yeah, basically esports is like the, as you can imagine, like the people who are at the top echelons of whatever their craft is or their game, like playing a sport, right? And there's a lot of different ways that manifests, but a lot of times there's like local leagues, and when I say local, they're normally like regions. So there's normally like an American league, like an Asian league, a European league, and often those culminate, depending on the game, will culminate in some sort of like international big tournament. So for people who might have heard random things, like for Dota 2, the big one is called the International. That one's like huge. For League of Legends, it's Worlds. For Counter-Strike, it's a little different because they have like a lot of majors. So it's like a lot of smaller tournaments, which aren't actually that small, but there isn't like a culmination at the end of the year. So I'd say they're kind of similar to traditional sports in that way, where they'll have like leagues that like lead to like a final like World Series or a championship game of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Evan will probably be able to talk a little bit more because I don't know a bunch about the infrastructure, but it definitely has grown a lot over the last years, right? Like there were points where I could qualify for these kind of things. It's definitely like way more structured now, where I don't think that you can do that.
I mean, one thing that we should point out is that these people at the upper echelons, the World Series of video games, the World Series of League of Legends, or World Series of CSGO, like they are considered professional athletes and they get paid as such too.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know anybody's particular salary, and there's been a lot of going on with like whether esports is profitable depending on your game. So a couple years ago, for example, North American League of Legends professionals could get paid upwards of $1 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of teams started like realizing that they can't afford that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of them gone down to like a couple $100K probably per year. But like, let's see, like what's the world's prize pool this year? So like, for example, like if you win this year's prize pool, you get a little over 2 million.
Yeah. Which I mean is
pretty
quite
damn
considerable.
good.
Yeah, I know. If you consider all sports, of course, like I mean, the main ones we watch, football, baseball, whatever, those are going to get paid a ton more. But when you consider all sports, like esport athletes get paid more than a majority of sports that we could see on TV in America. I'm thinking like field hockey and volleyball, all the things that show up on ESPN Plus. Like esports athletes will get paid more than those athletes.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, which is all just to say, like, it's very legitimate. It is very hard to become an esports athlete. It's like the equivalent of me saying, like, oh, like I want to go pro in soccer. It would be as difficult for me to go pro in soccer as it would going pro in esports. Which is to say, I'm not going to do either.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you have to grind all day. I mean, a lot of these guys probably started in like high school because nobody's like. No one's really telling you can go play video games all day when you're like 12 years old, right? But I mean, if you look up interviews with a lot of these professionals, they'll be like, oh yeah, like I started playing when I was like 16. And then they're like, yeah, college really wasn't for me, but I could do this. And they were just so good at it that it kind of panned out. What is really funny, so I think League of Legends is really like the competitive tournaments have been going on for probably over 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think they started in like 2011. But it's funny because obviously like players retire over time, so a lot of these new guys, like younger dudes, haven't even played the game since it was first released. So like if you can imagine, like 5 years ago, like all the people who are good were like the people who started playing at the game's conception. But as these games like age, it's crazy how all these like young players like knew all, it's like similar in sports where like they grew up like watching these other players and now they play against them. So it's kind of fun.
It's like if I joined Inter Miami, I'd be like, oh my God, hey, Messi. I've watched you for so long.
Yeah.
I did mention that I'll never go pro in esports, but I want to talk about my experience with League of Legends too, which is to say so horrible.
I've played a couple games with you, Hans. I thought it was fun.
So both my like high school friend group and college friend group had people who played League of Legends and who were far better than I was. Number one, I was not a League player growing up. And then number two is like League is a computer game that you use a mouse for. And I grew up playing with controllers on a console. And there is nothing more humbling than trying to play a computer game when you've been a console player, because it's like infuriating how how poorly I control. So I'd always get made fun of when I was playing League of Legends. They'd always tell me at least I'm not feeding, which is to say that at least I'm not dying so much, because every time I die, the other team gets more powerful. But in reality, I was always feeding, so they were just trying to protect my ego a little bit. So
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Video games, not to get off track too much, but it's funny because video games are notoriously like toxic player bases.
yes.
I think that it does take some mental fortitude to not get sucked into that. And I'm sure when I was younger, I was definitely worse. But now, like, I don't take the game as seriously. And I think it's way more fun to just kind of play like casual modes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One thing I also wanted to touch on was like my very first introduction to esports it was like 2009, I think. And it was through a TV series called WCG Ultimate Gamer. You ever heard about this?
No.
Dude, this was the most 2009 reality TV show you've ever seen. It wasn't like really esports, it was more like video game competitions. But like the way it was set up, it was like 10 people living in a house together, and then in the morning they would go and compete in a physical challenge that was like super ridiculous. So like they were like, "Oh, this challenge is Street Fighter themed and you have to like karate chop your opponents to get points." And then in the second half of the day, they would play a video game against the computer, and they'd rank people based on how well they did in that video game against the computer. And then so they would score points from the physical challenge and the video game challenge. And then like I think it was like the two worst people from those points would then go head to head in another video game battle, and whoever lost that game battle would be voted out of the house. So it was like wildly entertaining, actually. Yeah. Such a 2009 reality TV show.
But I know. I'm thinking about some now and I'm just cringing. But I think they were kind of cool. Okay, whatever. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, anyway, I just wanted to bring it up. We were talking about tangents, so there's another tangent. But I'll also bring in that as many people know, I am studying physical therapy currently. And as part of this, I went to like a continuing education session. And it was physical therapy treatment for the esport athlete. So I thought that was really interesting. It was a lot
of wrist exercises, I bet.
Yes, exactly. Wrist and hand, like carpal tunnel kind of thing. So how you can kind of help gamers with that. And then the flip side of it was they tend to have really bad posture when they're playing on their computers. So there's a lot of neck pain and low back pain. So
yeah, I bet.
Interesting. And the fact that there is physical therapy specific to the esports athlete should tell you how big esports has gotten, and then specifically like how much money it's gotten, because everyone is trying to get involved now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know a bunch of stories of people like getting injured, right, for like carpal tunnel or other like wrist strain injury kind of things.
Yeah.
But just in terms of, you're talking about them having like PTs maybe on staff, but they'll have like, I mean, obviously they'll have things like real coaches, right? And that depending on the game, right, they'll do different things. But they'll have things that are like less like what you'd expect, like performance coaches. So people who like keep your like mindset, like almost like psychologists.
Yeah.
On staff, they'll have like chefs that like help them all make the food. They'll have like, I mean, maybe different than PT, but like exercise coaches and stuff to like make sure they're fit, because, you know, these guys probably sit in a chair and play video games all day, which isn't that much different than what I do at work other than the video game part. But yeah, to keep them like physically fit. So there's like a lot. It's a whole industry, right? That's
exactly. And you want these players to have like longevity. You want them to have a long, healthy career. So it is really important to focus on more than just the gaming, but all aspects of health and well-being also. So that's why, like any other athlete, there's an entire team behind this person to try to achieve peak performance, right?
Yeah.
Paul, I have some fun facts if we want to hit some fun facts.
I'm really excited for these fun facts because I'm wondering if I'll know them this time, or if they'll be so niche that I won't.
Possibly. Maybe. Let's see. You want to give me a little tune?
Hans's fun facts. Hans's fun facts. Fun facts with Hans.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so the fun facts I focused on for this one have a lot to do with money and viewership, because I just wanted I didn't know. So I wanted to paint a picture for how big the esports scene actually is. So with that in mind, in 2024, it's estimated that the esports market will be worth about $1.62 billion. Billion with a B. There's approximately 6 esports players in the past year that have totals exceeding $5 million, and a total of 133 players that have a total exceeding $1 million. The most a single player earned last year was $7.18 million. There is currently 285.7 million esports viewers. So I know that's a lot of numbers, but they're a lot of big numbers, right? This is all to say, again, it's huge, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year's league finals got somewhere around 6 to 7 million people watching it, which, I mean, obviously like isn't as big as like traditional sports, but still pretty crazy when you think of how many people are watching for like advertising dollars, right? Like things that like make the league actually run. Like nobody cares if they're actually watching unless there's like profitability into it.
Right. Exactly.
It's just like way more than I think even I realize sometimes.
Yeah. And now, currently, there is a $50 million arena that was built by Comcast called the Fusion Arena that is esports specific. It holds 3,500 spectators, and it is based in Philadelphia. So I thought that was really interesting, too. They have their own specific stadium also.
Yeah. Well, and they'll go play at other like large stadiums. For example, last year or 2 years ago, Eric Guan, who was on the Spikeball episode, and I went to New York to go watch the quarterfinals of whatever year it was, League's finals. And it was in Madison Square Garden. And then I think when the finals was in LA, and Evan, I believe, with one of my other friends, Weber from the D&D episode, went to that finals. And that was in, you know, some huge arena in LA, right? Filled up. So
yeah,
I mean, it just gets packed. So they'll fill out like real stadiums as well, which is really cool.
What did you notice about the crowd? Was it like were they from everywhere? Because I feel like it's such a global phenomena too.
Well, I think the league specifically, and it's actually not true for all games, but league specifically is really big in Korea and China. That's where like those are the countries that dominate in the game. And so a lot of the people who came were definitely from those countries because, you know, their teams are better. So they were all in the quarterfinals. So I think it was those people mostly supporting their teams.
Yeah. Any idea why Korea and China tend to have like the best teams, better than North America or Europe or Oceania, anywhere?
I don't really know. There's some things that people say like internet connectivity is better and the culture is more built up around it. But you'd think that would be true for all games then, but it's not. So for Counter-Strike, for example, Europe and South America are both really good.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Mostly Europeans are really good at that game. I don't know about other like esports, but I just know that like it's not always Asia that's really good at sports. So I think it kind of just depends on the game, right? And obviously like probably there's like sub pockets of cultures that like playing a game, right? Like it kind of just like builds up hype in that country. So if like nobody wants to play shooting games in Asia, right? Maybe they're banned for some reason. I have no clue. But like certain types of games are probably more popular, which, you know, more player bases equals you probably have better teams.
Yeah. Better players. Another fun fact for you, Paul. The first esports tournament was with the video game Intergalactic Space War Olympics. It was held at Stanford University on October 9th, 1972. And the prize for winning this epic esports tournament was a year subscription to Rolling Stone magazine.
I bet that was cool then. Did you know that a lot of schools have esports teams now?
I did, because that's another one of my fun facts. Hey, Paul, you're so good at CSGO, you might as well go get yourself a scholarship.
Yeah.
So, sanctioned esports teams. So they play against other schools. Like there's a collegiate league. So it's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Even when we were in college, Hans, like there was a club that would compete. I don't think they were giving out scholarships at that point, but I did join it.
Oh, I didn't know you joined it.
It really wasn't for me.
Okay.
But yeah, it existed in 2017 too.
Paul, do you want to make a guess for what the most played games of 2022 were. I apologize for the
2022?
delay of a single year, but this was what the data I had. The most played games of 2022. This is not necessarily esports specific. This is all games.
Oh man. Because it could really be like a game of the year kind of thing. Like if what was The Legend of Zelda's sequel? Did it come out that year?
I say it's a good guess, but I think you're making it a little more complicated. It
Okay.
is
Well, then the three that I would probably say is Dota, League, and either CS or Valorant, probably.
great guesses. So League is one of them. I think you're gonna not be surprised by this one. Fortnite.
Oh,
Another.
I forgot about Fortnite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No worries. Yeah, that one is obviously ginormous. And then it wasn't CS, but it was a game called Crossfire, which is really weird to think about. I know because I had never even heard of it either. But Crossfire is a Korean version of CS:GO. It's a Korean CS clone. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I don't think CS is like played everywhere.
Yeah, right. Cool. Okay, Paul, that's all my fun facts I got for you today. Before we go on to any like resources, do you have anything else you want to touch on with esports?
The one thing that I will say is the places that you can watch if you're ever curious is mostly on YouTube and Twitch. Twitch is like the big like video game streaming platform, and
Yep.
a lot of them are also on YouTube now. But I would say Twitch is like the go-to, now owned by Amazon.
Yeah.
So if you're ever, if you like any games, or if, even if it's not esports related, if you ever just like see video games that come out and you want to see someone play it, that's probably the platform that's best to do it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there, Paul.
The only other thing I'll just plug the League of Legends World Final. We'll make Evan do a prediction, but the World Finals should be Saturday, November 2nd.
Awesome. Yeah. The only plug I want to give is for WCG Ultimate Gamer. Wild, entertaining. Paul's giving me a shake of the head. Wildly entertaining 2009 reality show. And it is available. I looked it up. You can watch the entirety in parts on YouTube. So I'll make a plug there. But anyway, that's all I got. And we're going to bring Evan on now so he can talk about League and esports after the break. Welcome back, everybody. Joining us now, we have Paul's friend from high school, Evan Peng. Evan, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Evan, if you wouldn't mind just starting, give yourself a little introduction and then how you got into esports and League of Legends.
Yeah, so I've been playing video games since I was, like 7-ish when I got a GameCube. And then I was playing Halo Combat Evolved when it came out when I was like 10-ish. And I actually heard about League of Legends then when it came out, but no one thought it would survive. Everyone thought that like Dota 2 or Heroes of New Earth, a similar game to kill it. I've played StarCraft, and that's when I started getting into esports, kind of the original video game of esports. And then in high school, I started playing CSGO, and that's how Paul and I kind of like got into esports, I think. Where it's just like we played a lot of CSGO in class, and we would like go over to each other's houses to watch games and everything. And then we started playing League, and then just kind of naturally just started watching League as well. And yeah, that's the gist of it.
I was telling Hans that you are the one who probably got me into video games, or PC gaming specifically, playing Source on school laptops.
That was a great time.
So you're playing these video games on the school laptops?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we played it during lunch, and then we started watching CSGO during lunch, like esports.
We were definitely at the coolest table.
Absolutely.
It sounds like a healthy use of your educational time.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. Evan, would you mind just giving a background on like the esports you've competed in or what you're currently watching?
Yeah, so now I'm kind of only watching League. I've never actually competed in esports. I just played CSGO competitively online with Paul.
Gotcha.
Back in high school, and we played in like I don't know if you were there, Paul. Were you there at the Razor tournament?
No, I didn't do the Razor tournament. I thought you might have been on that team with me when we tried to do that, like qualify for that minor tournament. Remember the one that we could have gotten streamed on Twitch? Like we had a real caster. Were you on? I don't think you were on that
I was
team,
not.
but
I was not.
Okay.
I think I wasn't able to go for some reason, and you guys had Chad instead. But yeah, I played like a local tournament to CS:GO. Didn't win. Sad. I think CS:GO was probably my most competitive game. I hit the 3rd highest rank, as did Paul, and then one of our friends hit like the 2nd highest rank. But otherwise, no real competition. Just watching a lot.
Mm-hmm. What's Paul like as a teammate? Good team dynamics.
From what I remember, Paul's good. I don't think Paul was one of the toxic ones. From what I remember.
Yeah, comparatively to other, I might not be toxic. I am loud and annoying. I do know that about myself. I just can't shut up.
Loud and annoying we can deal with.
Yeah, but hopefully, at least now, I don't think I'm toxic anymore.
Yeah, it's so easy to be toxic though in esports because like in video games, just because you're not face to face with people, and it's like usually it's over chat, so you can kind of just say whatever you want to people, and then people just get so toxic. I'm not that toxic, I like to think.
It's the anonymity thing, right? Like you can hide behind your screen, so people flame their teammates, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so kind of talking about like esports, I think the age-old question, just to kind of start us off, is like how esports like is similar or is not similar to regular sports. Do you have any kind of thoughts on that, or like why people like watch esports? Is it like in a similar context to regular sports? And then we can kind of dive into later like, the actual setup of them. Are they kind of similar?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the main appeal of esports versus regular sports is kind of just like the very easy barrier of entry to it. It's like if you want to play basketball, you need to go to like a court. Maybe you play pickup, maybe find some people, get in or don't. But then like video games is very just you can kind of play whatever you want, and that's kind of the same with like watching. Watching is like I just pull it up on YouTube and Twitch. It's all free to watch. And then while like NFL, you need to get like the YouTube pass or whatever it is, like the Sunday ticket, things like that. And that makes it pretty difficult. That's just in terms of like barrier of entry. In terms of how it's run these days, it's very esports is trying hard to emulate regular sports, where it's like you have leagues, you have like regulations, commissioners, players unions even, and then you have people selling out stadiums for tournaments with prize pools and everything. Actually, regular sports doesn't have prize pools, and most of them, I believe. But it's very similar in terms of how it's applied, I guess.
Yeah, I'd assume you get something for winning, like the World Series or whatever NBA Finals. I bet there's some sort of monetary value that you get.
Yeah.
What have you noticed in terms of like how those leagues are run? Right, you're talking about how they're trying to emulate regular sports. Is that in terms of like the league setup? How they're trying to monetize?
Yeah, so in terms of the league setup, it's very similar, I think, where people are now realizing that having teams get relegated a lot is not very healthy for the ecosystem, especially how young it is. So people are like buying out spots in leagues, like the League of Legends. You have to pay for like a spot and you get a franchise spot. And then that makes it so like teams are mainstays, and then the players are the ones who rotate. In terms of monetization, it's actually very different, and it's kind of one of the huge issues with esports, where video game creators like Riot are the ones who actually run these esports, and they don't do TV deals like they do in like the NFL or the NBA, where they pay teams to participate and like the broadcast makes money. For example, in League, Riot makes money is they lose money hosting the esport, but then they hope that people will buy skins or in-game content to fund themselves. And that money doesn't propagate back to the teams, which is one of the issues on like why esports is struggling a little bit right now.
Yeah, I've noticed, I've noticed a lot in League. I don't watch a bunch of regular sports, but Hans, maybe you can speak to it.
Sure.
Everything in esports has now become branded in some way. I feel like when I started watching Counter-Strike esports maybe 10 years ago at this point, it was not that way. But now everything is like a Red Bull replay or like a Honda recap or, something like that. I'm assuming they do something like that. I feel like State Farm is big in football where they'll do like a State Farm replay or something like that, right? And it feels weird when they're doing it, but it's funny like how the ads kind of just like blend in now. Like I could just fire off as many as I could, but like, have you noticed that kind of change like in other leagues, Evan, or just like other ways they're trying to monetize money? Because you were saying like, yeah, they don't make a bunch of money off the broadcast, but I feel like they're trying to find other sources of revenue.
Yeah, they're trying to like offset it with things like, as you said, I think League actually was also the State Farm analyst desk. Same one. Yeah. So I noticed that with League, I know Overwatch League tried something similar, but Overwatch League has folded. I think Valorant also does something similar where they try, the Red Bull is a big sponsor. But yeah, like sponsorships are one of the very few ways that they're able to kind of generate revenue, because one of the main differences, like the TV deals thing, is that with Overwatch League, they actually sold the rights to broadcast to Twitch. I think it was $90 million. Basically, Twitch was the only one to do that. And then they sold, after that expired, their deal, they sold it to YouTube, and I think that was $160 million, which sounds really good, but Overwatch League was ran very poorly, so it all kind of went down the drain. Like, that was like one of the few attempts at trying to get something similar of like TV deals and propagate money through, because sponsorships are just kind of offsetting the costs rather than making actual money off it.
Yeah, do you think that's just because of a lack of viewers, so the dollars aren't high enough, like per viewer? Or is it just, I don't even know what else matters to advertisers other than how many people see your content?
Definitely. I think viewership is declining in some areas, except for like League, I think. In Valorant, viewership is rising. But if you look at like Dota's viewership has declined extremely heavily, particularly just looking at the international. But I think with sponsorships, the reason why sponsors are pulling out now is that they're starting to realize that gamers aren't spending money on them. The whole reason why State Farm wanted to get in, and like a lot of car sponsorships exist, like Mercedes, BMW, Honda sponsors the entire North American League of Legends scene. These people are the gamers are spending a lot of money, but are not spending money on cars and like even chairs, like Secret Lab or whatever, like Red Bull, right? They're spending money on the in-game content, like skins and stuff, which is why Riot still does esports, because they know that this convinces people to play the game more, which wants them to make them want to buy skins, etc. But then sponsors are like, oh, we want to tap into this market, and then people just aren't spending money on their shit. So it's getting tough.
Do you know why it's different in the esports scene compared to, like, let's just take, NFL or MLB, NBA? It's like in there, the advertising has been sustainable in the sense that they keep doing it, right? So someone is buying their stuff, but it just doesn't seem to be working out in the esports scene. Do you have any clue as to what the big difference is there? Is it like gamers themselves are more frugal spenders, or like what's going on there?
That's a good question. I think just my intuition would say it's basically that, where it's not necessarily they're frugal, but it's like the people who are really into esports and want to spend money on the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then like if you look at average, what part of the reason why marketers really want to get into esports is that esports has the youngest average viewer base in terms of age by far, right? Like, I think I saw a graph earlier, and it's like the average viewer is like late 20s, early 30s, while NFL, NBA, you're getting much older. Mm-hmm. People who are like more likely have older ideas, like ideologies about like what they want to spend their money on and stuff, while the younger generation is more disillusioned to a lot of these like things, I guess.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it, right? And it definitely seems like the products that people are advertising in esports are more related to the kinds of products that those consumers are using. I mean, obviously there's weirder ones like cars, but I feel like a lot of them are like energy drinks or like computer parts manufacturers or create, things like that. Or like, like G Fuel, right?
Yeah.
Or like someone who makes like keyboards or peripherals things. But I think like in your normal advertising, right, like you're just trying to get a broader audience. Like if I'm just watching like a baseball game, right, like the advertisements are not for gloves or baseballs. They're for like healthcare or whatever. So I'm curious to like who decides like what would make sense to market in what kind of context. I don't know the answer, but I would think that it makes more sense to advertise a mouse, right, to a gamer, because eventually, right, it's all just that brand recognition. Like when I was looking for a new keyboard, I was like, oh, I know HyperX, right? Like I'll go look at their website first. And I'm definitely probably a a chump for the ads, right? Like I definitely go and look at things that I see ads for. They get to me.
The perfect consumer over here.
I am. I'm a consumer that wants people to give me targeted advertisements.
Yeah, I think ads, like sponsorships that are staying, are very related, and like they have to be seeing some sort of return if they're going to stay for so long. Like Red Bull's been here forever. State Farm has been here quite a while. MasterCard is an easy one, I think, just because in-game purchases, they give you rewards. They enter you in giveaways if you use a MasterCard in League. Mm-hmm. So that's a very easy one for them. The North American League recently got a sponsorship that I thought was weird. I think it was like pot stickers. I think they got a pot sticker sponsorship from Pagoda. And it's like it's like frozen pot stickers, and like they're advertising like the North American League now. Maybe it's because they assume a lot of the people who watch are Asian, or just gamers want frozen food. But yeah, there are some weird advertisers that come and go. Like Budweiser used to sponsor the North American League. I don't know if they still do anymore.
So kind of other than advertising though, like it's interesting other ways that I've seen esports leagues try to take the knowledge of like traditional sports and kind of implement them. You're talking about Overwatch League, and I don't know how much you actually know about the Overwatch League, but I think the one thing that I thought was interesting from them that I don't think other games do is they tried to make it location based. The teams were like the San Francisco Shock or whatever, like the Houston whatevers, right? I don't know if they traveled, but have you seen like different ways that leagues are trying to like convince people to be on a specific team as opposed to like maybe picking a specific player, and so then there isn't like brand loyalty in that way?
That's the I think that is kind of the fundamental issue of esports in the very end. It's exactly what you said, where people aren't picking teams, they're picking players. I think some teams, one example is 100 Thieves. They're running into some money problems, but I think they try to kind of build brand loyalty by being an apparel company, kind of, first and foremost. And then like they were selling like a lot of hoodies and like making like streetwear and stuff and getting like fashionable people to wear them all.
They definitely have a big brand in terms of like other streamers, right? Like, yeah. I think the 100 Thieves brand is bigger than esports, which is not always the case.
I think content organizations or just team like esports organizations are trying to like find people who can kind of be like brand ambassadors for them, and that can like build loyalty to their brand through that. But like definitely if they left, and we've seen this countless of times in the past, it becomes a huge issue for these teams. Like if you look at Immortals, one of the League of Legends North American teams that recently departed, they make YouTube videos, and I think it gets like 70 views.
They still exist, really, to this day?
The videos exist. I don't think they exist in North American League anymore, but the videos still exist, and they get like 70 views, right? And then you could see this with like other teams who are trying to make content around their team. But like if you don't have popular players, or these players aren't making the content themselves, it starts to fall off a lot, and there's really no real answer to it. I think, as you said, Overwatch League has tried really hard to do that with their whole city, like location-based, like even country-based approach. But I don't think that's really... I mean, obviously, that didn't really pan out well for them.
Yeah. Well, sounds like I didn't realize that Overwatch League is no longer a thing.
Yeah, they shuttered a little bit post-COVID. After, I think during COVID, of course, they like abandoned... They went to like purely online play. And then what happened was that they said, hey, like, if you want to leave, you have to pay us $6 million to leave, or something like that. And then 2/3 of the teams left. And then they were like, we got no teams anymore. So then they shuttered it, yeah.
Oh, geez, okay. I wanted to touch on what you were talking about before, Evan, is there a specific, like, esports athlete that is particularly famous, or how does that work? Or in the teams, is there always a rotation? You don't really get a connection with the players?
That's a very good question. And in general, that is how it goes. But there are certain players who have managed to establish like brands for themselves, particularly in like these team-based games like League of Legends. And StarCraft, it's very different because it's 1v1s, so people aren't really attached to teams at all.
Okay.
But I guess in League, the most famous example is going to be, of course, Faker from SK Telecom, or T1 as they're now known. It's a South Korean team. And they have like, he's almost unanimously, if not unanimously, like, considered the greatest player of all time. and he's only stayed on this one team ever since he started playing. And so that's kind of propelled T1 to this kind of like stardom, especially within Korea, where they're kind of run more like a K-pop organization in a sense, where they're like their players are always doing like ad deals and like all these like events and meet and greets. And it's like no matter who joins the team, players rotate all the time within that team, but no matter who joins, like they become like fan favorites or like get heavily scrutinized both ways because Faker is just there always in the center of it all. I think that's like one of the few examples of players who have managed to like keep brand, like be essentially the brand. There are like some examples in Europe. Caps, when he joined G2, has become like kind of a staple, but he definitely hasn't. He's been moving around teams before as well, so it's kind of just Faker, if like off the top of my head.
So do you get the sense that like viewers of esports are more attached to like a player like Faker? Are they attached to a team like T1, or are they attached to like a location? Like, for example, I'm from North America, so I'll root for the North American team, or I'm from South Korea, so I'll root for whoever is representing South Korea that year.
Yeah, it kind of just goes for player, then location, and then team.
Okay,
which is
so
the biggest problem.
Allegiance to the team, really.
Essentially, no.
Okay.
There are like some people, but like typically it's gonna be people who like really like one player.
Okay.
And it's either going to be the best players or the players with like personality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Actually, well, I have two thoughts on that. Evan's definitely right. Rooting for your location is a huge thing that they try to push. So actually, one of the things that I think they do really well, and I don't think this is necessarily emulating regular sports, but it like you can draw a direct parallel, are things like rivalries and storylines. So like Evan was saying, right, like one of the big things that you root for is your region. So right now the League World Championship is going on. And I don't know if I've mentioned this already, but China and Korea are almost always the best two regions. And the second tier regions are normally North America and Europe. And because of that, right, we kind of have a rivalry with Europe as like the next best region. And so it's every single time that they play each other, like the storylines of like which team is better, like what's their normal like head-to-head competition is like played up so much, and like they chalk up bigger views than sometimes like the really best teams, because like people really want to like really care about that as opposed to it just being like really good gameplay.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense. So it's like another and it's like any rivalry, right? Like I'm sure like Red Sox and the Yankees, right? Like whether or not the teams are good, like people kind of care about that game because there's like history to it, right? And you can make a lot of interest even if the game isn't going to be good.
Yeah, I hear that. Like you're building the narrative, or narrative is being pushed so that there's more viewers, there's more interest in whatever game that is, even if it's not the world number 1 versus the world number 2.
Yeah. And I think that it's even clearer this year where, you know, I don't necessarily know all the people who are now on these North American leagues, because to be honest, I don't even watch the North American League on a regular basis because they're not very good games, like gameplay wise. But during the World Championship, like I will root for them over any other region just because like I feel that attachment to it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think like if you looked at Korea versus China, when China makes it to the finals of the League of Legends World Championships, viewership is skyrockets no matter how unpopular a Chinese team is. Last year it was T1 versus this Chinese team called Weibo. They have a popular player on their team, but they're not a popular team at all because they're within China they were considered very bad. And then like their run to the finals, some might consider to be a kind of like a fluke, right? But regardless, there were 6 million viewers in the world from other countries, from Korea, America, etc., watching that World Finals. There were 120 million people from China watching that. Just one game because China was playing in it, even though they're an unpopular team. I think when a popular team was playing in 2021, I believe, when Edward Gaming was playing Damwon Kia, a Korean team, Edward Gaming is a Chinese team, I think the viewership was around 250 million. It is wildly popular in China, and China is wildly nationalistic. So when their teams make the finals, and if it's a popular one, it's lights out.
I see. Okay, that number is kind of shocking to me, but it does make sense ultimately. It's kind of like I kind of equate it to like I guess like the World Cup. You know, it's like I don't care where, like, what club teams these players are coming from. Like, I'm gonna root for whoever's playing for the United States.
Yeah. And I think it's when Evan was talking about kind of the hierarchy of who you care about, players, location, then team, there might be a lot of issues in esports too with the player being so highly regarded. And it kind of makes me think of Messi in regular sports. Like, so much is done for that specific guy. Like, people will support whatever team he's on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
They'll like, the MLS is like doing things specifically for him, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't think he plays on turf or something like that. And I think it kind of ends up being, I mean, not to the same extent, but a similar like mindset in esports where like your allegiance will just swap with a player. But also, and this is what's crazy, right? Like, I bet Messi has a bunch of ventures that he does that probably make him more money than the actual league pays him in the MLS. Like, I'm sure his sponsorships with like Nike or whatever. I was just walking in the grocery store and I think he has like a beverage brand, something by Messi. Just got all this nonsense, right? That he makes so much money on. And I think that Hans is holding up Messi Lays.
These are my Messi Lay's chips.
Oh my god.
Yeah, nailed the head right there.
There's so much that he can make outside of the game, right? And I think for him, like, it's still worthwhile to be competitive because I think that's a lot of what like builds his brand. But I think in esports, that's not always the case. So like, as people get really popular, they sometimes will make more money not playing the game professionally, and then they'll leave the scene. So a lot of people will become streamers. So like, actually the person that I enjoy watching the most in terms of like the person who covers it, I don't like watching the main broadcast. I follow this guy named Cadril, who is an ex-pro who became a professional caster, who then became a professional streamer. And he makes so much more money talking about the game in like a fun, like streamer kind of way than actually playing it or working for the company that does it. And he's not alone, right? Like, that's probably like somewhat common for popular players, that I don't know if it drives people to continue their career when it's like, oh, I know I'm never going to like win the highest level of competition, so maybe I'll just make some money and just do this for fun.
That's basically exactly what happened as well to like Doublelift. He was, for those who don't know, it's like a North American League of Legends professional. He was quietly considered like the greatest of all time to play for North America, but then he quit because he was like, I'm not as good as I was anymore, and so like my aspirations have died down, and I'm making more money streaming by like with his own personality. But definitely isn't. It's actually it's not commonplace in that a lot of players struggle to build personalities because like if you're really good at games, odds are that your personality isn't going to be like very extroverted. Right, like Faker, his personality, in all honesty, is kind of like very bland. He's a very nice guy, right? But he's very bland. But he is on everything that they can put him on. Like when we were in high school, I don't know if you know this, Paul, when we were still in high school, BC, I don't know if you're watching League then, but he was on the buses.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. And I didn't even know who he was. I didn't play League of Legends at the time, but like I knew of him just because of how popular he was in Asia.
Yeah, they'll put him on buses. They put him on ice cream, on Coke. They have a skincare collaboration now.
I bet he's on Lay's chips, Hans.
Honestly, probably.
Yeah, Evan, I also was wondering if I imagine for a second that I'm new to League of Legends, which you don't have to imagine that hard. If I wanted to be like the best in the world, if I wanted to win the world championship, like what does my road to glory look like to get there?
Okay. So I think the general consensus, and like studies have shown this, is that if you can't hit within like the top 3 ranks, so the top rank is Challenger, and then there's Grandmaster and Master, if you can't hit that within 2 years of starting, you're almost certainly never going to hit it.
Okay.
That's something that's been studied,
you start at like bronze, right? Or bronze 3 or something.
You start at like bronze-ish. I think there's several ranks. There's like iron, bronze, silver, gold. Those are like the majority of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then it falls sharply off that in terms of percentage. And then it goes like platinum, emerald, diamond, and then the masters.
Gotcha. So you have to be in those top 3 ranks.
Yeah, you should hit it very quickly. And it's like that's why talent is a huge part of this. Mm-hmm. There's this League of Legends player right now. His name is Sniper. He's very young. He plays for North America. All of his entire family has hit Challenger. 2 of them were pros, as well. So it's like his family just like has like innate talent somehow in like the milk they're feeding them or something like that. But
Gamer fuel.
yeah, it's like basically that. It's like somehow all 3 of them, like these 3 brothers, have all hit Challenger. 2 of them play professionally. It's like things like that are very rare. And if you think about it, like you can think about this with basketball and college basketball and like college football as well, where so many people play the sport, and especially with video games, so many people play the video game, right? I think, let's say, I don't know, like 2 million people played in America. I'm just pulling that out of my ass for League, right? There are 8 teams in North America with 5 players. You have to be top 40 out of like several million.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes worldwide. So if you can't hit those ranks really quickly, you're probably never getting in, realistically. After that, it's going to be trying to get scouted. You're going to need to... Scouting is actually very easy from what I've heard, in terms of if you're really good and you're playing at that highest level. Challenger, I believe, is 200 players. I could be wrong. You're going to be playing against the same people a lot, and a lot of those people are going to be professionals. That's one of the differences between this and regular sports, where you can run into professionals in your games, right? And then so like professionals would be like, oh my god, I keep playing against Hans and he just keeps stomping me in my games. It's like, hey, we should like look at Hans for this like position next year. And then you get scouted like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just be good, and you'll if you're good enough, they'll try to get you.
Yeah. And then Hans, for most games, like there's normally like either you play in like small tournaments, which will like either give you some sort of like qualification into like a larger tournament, or you're in like a league, right? So like you might get scouted into one of these like teams in a league, and then if you win that league, you kind of move on to like another tournament level up. So as long as you like win whatever you're in, like you'll just keep progressing. So as long as you're the best,
Gotcha.
it's pretty easy to progress. There's nothing like gating you from winning the world championship if you're good enough.
Yeah.
And then let's say like I am one of the best in North America and I make it on a North American team. Does my North American team now have to like win the North American League to make it into like the World Championships?
Right now it's top 3.
Top 3.
But yeah, you did come top 3 in the league, and then it's usually like a double round robin. I actually don't know how it is now.
They do this thing called Swiss, which I don't want to explain
yeah.
because it's a little complicated, but I think it's better.
Yeah, they do like different brackets, and then you would have to play against all the other countries, right? Who all have their own way of playing the game, and the game changes constantly. Another difference between this and real sports is that the game League of Legends and most video games change a lot. League of Legends is a weekly update. And the game is changing constantly, so you have to adapt, which is why pro players' 10 years are pretty short term.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and if you manage to adapt better than everyone else and you have the mechanical skill to do it, then you will play through it, you'll go to playoffs, and then you'll hopefully make finals, win finals, and yeah, that's it. You become world champion.
Good.
You get your own League of Legends skin.
Oh, really? They'll put you in the game, huh?
They put you in the game, yeah. And you get the money from the sales.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds like I have some work to do.
Yeah. Start grinding.
Evan, actually, I want to talk about something that you touched on, which is kind of like the flexibility. Well, maybe not flexibility, but like the constant updating.
Yeah.
So in almost all games, right, there's updates. So like in League of Legends, like there's characters that you can play, right? And the powers will like get increased or decreased depending on how good they are in the game, right? To kind of balance everybody out. You know, in other games, like let's talk about like a shooting game, right? Like the guns might like get increased in damage per shot or decreased, or maybe their fire rate might change, like things like that. Or the maps might change, right? Like there might be something like external to the specific player. Do you think that helps drive like engagement in games because it's constantly changing? Or do you think that it almost makes it harder for people to follow, like when they're new to it, right?
I think it definitely drives engagement because people get bored of seeing the same thing happen a lot. At least in video games, that's very common. Because let's say you take basketball, for example, there aren't that many variables in play. You have your indoor stadium, right? I'm pretty sure there has to be some sort of defined standard for how the stadium is built. You have the same hoops, the same distance, the same balls, right? The only difference is like your players and like the strategy you're playing. But then in video games, there's the third element, which is going to be like the game itself. And that changes so often that new people are always discovering new ways to play the game, and like how people generally refer to this as the meta of a game. in terms of how it's played. And then because the meta is changing, people are able to try new things and be better at certain times or worse at other times, right? Like, I think that in basketball, the meta really changed when, like, Steph Curry was just started shooting threes, right? He's just blasting threes, and all of a sudden people are like, shooting threes is now how you win the game. But that's like, that change took a really long time. But then in League, at least, like, if the update's every week, and if they do a huge update, then everything could change really drastically. And I think that gives people more incentive to keep watching because they're more likely to find new things that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel the same way. I mean, I think in some sense, right, and I think this is true with most video games. No, not all video games, but sometimes they're hard to get into as a person who's never played them. Do you think that it's mostly people who play the game that are going to watch it, or do you think that an average person would get value of watching a game that they have not played?
That's a very good question. I think I personally, from my experience, I've noticed that League of Legends is easier for people to get into for not playing. Like, last World Championship, my girlfriend would stay up with me to watch. She doesn't play at all, but she very quickly was able to develop like an understanding of the game and like know when like bad things were happening to like my favorite team or like good things were happening, right? But there are some games where it's going to be very difficult. Dota is, for example, Dota is a game very similar to League of Legends that League of Legends was copied from, actually. But it's a lot more graphics heavy and a lot more complicated in a sense. And that kind of drives people away from it because it's very hard to watch it and understand what's happening when there's so many things happening on the screen, right? Another example is like StarCraft. StarCraft was really popular. Well, the original esport basically was really popular in Korea, but it could be hard to watch because players are doing so many things at once that you don't really know what's happening. And like it can be very unclear if something was good or not for a player to do. While in League of Legends, it's a lot more simple, or like shooting games like Counter-Strike or like Call of Duty, it's very simple. It's just like, oh, they killed them all. Like, that's like cool, right? But it's definitely hard to get into these things if you don't play yourself, at least.
What about live events? Like, I know you've been to some League of Legends live events. I think we've been together to Counter-Strike live events, at least in smaller scales. Do you think that that's like a good environment for like people who are new or like people who like the game? Like, is there a difference between watching live versus watching on YouTube or Twitch?
If you want to just have fun and maybe not understand, you don't want to like learn what's happening, which is completely fine. You probably want to go in person because people are going to be like screaming more and there's going to be a lot more like just loud noises and like sound effects, visual effects, etc. But if you want to like actually learn, I think in all the esports I've watched, casters are very good at explaining things, what's happening. And it's going to be a lot more clear if you watch it at home through Twitch. Mm-hmm. Maybe you also find a personality you like Paul mentioned this personality named Cajol, right? Maybe you like watching him, and he's very good at explaining things, and maybe that's how you get into it. That's one of the beauty of video games, where it doesn't need to be social at all. You kind of just watch it by yourself, or play by yourself, but if you want to go in person, that's tons of fun. At least personally, I really enjoy going in person, even though it's on the screen.
I think it's really fun to go in person because I think that something that maybe people who don't get, like that watching esports would be fun, especially like when it's just like on your TV, like you would watch any other thing. Like, I guess I get it. Like, it's not your thing, just like how I don't really like watching basketball or something like that. But just as like kind of a story, I brought my friend Ethan, who did the chess episode, to the League of Legends North American Finals, which happened in Raleigh, North Carolina when I was living there. And it was maybe like 2 days of 5 games each day. And by the second game, he was so into it. The crowd was like really lively. Like there were fireworks and stuff like going off in the stadium. Like He was like, wait, this was really fun. And like when he left, he's like, he didn't come to the second day. He's like, damn, I wish that like he could have gone to another one. Like he was so into it, but he thinks the game is stupid otherwise. So.
Okay.
Yeah, my friends, when we watched the World Finals in San Francisco that same year, I believe, I had some friends come visit, and then like some of them like brought their like girlfriends and whatnot, and they came to watch too. And I don't think any of them like really had an idea what was happening, but from what I remember, they had a blast because it was like that huge stadium. It was the Chase Stadium in San Francisco. Everyone's just like screaming. Really cool things happened and sort of like visual effects, and there was like musical performances. I think Lil Nas X was that performance that year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. In person, I think you've changed my mind. I think in person is probably better actually for people who are just getting into it, unless you're trying to be very serious about it.
Yeah, you probably want to go with friends who know, like, can probably tell you a little bit about it. But I think like it's very similar to why people like going to live sports, because I feel like you kind of get swept up in the action or in the crowd.
Yeah, and just to add some context there too, is Chase Stadium is where Golden State plays, so people go there, right, to support Golden State. I imagine it's even more hype when it's full of everyone who's enjoying, esports. So just wanted to add that in there too. Evan, do you have any like particularly exciting tournaments you've seen, or any like remarkable events, fond memories you have of esports?
Yeah, I think it's gonna have to be that tournament I was just talking about, the World Finals in 2022.
Yeah.
It was like there was a huge underdog run throughout the tournament versus a team that was like good. It was T1 actually against T1. Not T1 weren't the underdogs, but they were like T1 was looking like they were poised to win it. They had stomped the underdogs all the year because they're both Korean teams. And so in the regional league, they just stomped them all year. Everyone's like they have no chance. And then like it went to all 5 games, the best of 5. There were like some absolutely insane plays, and then everyone was just screaming. And then the underdogs won. Well, I was not rooting for them, but they won. And that was like one of the greatest like runs of probably the greatest run of all time, given the caliber of opponent they've had to face on their way here. And it's just those kinds of events are like the ones where I'm willing to like shell out money for. I've been to like the North American regional games down in Los Angeles when I used to live in California, and those are still tons of fun because a lot of those people, even if you go to the smaller events are going to be filled with people who are like serious about it and like just enjoy enjoy the game. And if you go to larger events, you're going to get a lot more breadth, but they're going to be a lot more exciting. So I feel like even if you only have the opportunity to go to small events, you should still go. I think it was still tons of fun for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Paul was excited to do this, but I think I can let you take it away, Paul. But he really wanted you to predict this year's World Championship series.
Yeah, at the very least, who do you think is going to be in the finals?
Okay, so for those who don't know, right now in Worlds, we are in the playoffs. In World Championship, we are in the playoffs. There's top 8 teams.
As of like 3 hours ago.
Yeah, as of 3 hours ago. I actually woke up this morning just to watch the games.
Yeah, same
but it is because there are 4 Chinese teams, 3 Korean teams, and 1 American team that have made the top 8. And then they are going to play best of 5s, single elimination until they hit the final. So 3 best of 5s to win everything. Ooh, I think this Korean team called Hanwha Life Esports is going to take it. I don't think they're not necessarily like the tournament favorites. They're considered one of the best teams in the world, but I think they have a path to finals that makes sense for them. And I think if they get there, they're going to improve enough that they can beat the current tournament favorites, who are known as Genji, also a Korean team. Obvious, as you can tell, and Paul's explained, it's really just Korean and Chinese teams playing.
The one North American loner that
yeah,
may or may not deserve to be there.
The North America team is going against Genji, the Korean team, and I think people are expecting that to be kind of a bloodbath. Okay. I don't think it's gonna go well. Yeah, I'm rooting for the America team, but I don't think it's gonna go well.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like I think even if you don't watch the game, like know anything about the game, you can just like kind of tell that the skill level is just not there.
Yeah,
gotcha.
So yeah, I think Hanwha will take it. I think it'll be Hanwha and Genji finals. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I would think. I was kind of thinking the same thing. I think the only saving grace for China, I was actually thinking is Top Esports, who's like the second ranked Chinese team. But I think if they beat T1, I think they could actually do something and get to the finals.
Yeah.
But I think Genji's kind of like the lock if I had to put my money on it.
Yeah. It's like T1 is playing Top Esports. T1 beat the team with Faker. This is Faker's 9th World Championship. He has won 100 games. He has played 39 best of 5s. I think the second closest is like 19.
Oh,
yeah, he's won 4 times.
He's won 4 times. He is the only person to win 4. Yeah, he's the only person to win more than 2. He's not the best right now, but he is still in the running.
Gotcha. And then obviously, Evan, this whole podcast is about like diving headfirst into a new passion, a new hobby every week. So what's kind of the elevator pitch for why someone should get into League of Legends and esports?
Honestly, I don't think you need to get into League of Legends necessarily.
Okay.
But if you want to get into esports, just play video games. Like that's like kind of the beauty of it. Just find a game you love, play it, right? And then like if you love it enough, you'll probably start consuming more and more content of it, and that'll just naturally lead you to start playing esports or watching it more. Like even if your whole thing is like Stardew Valley, for example, right? There's like Stardew Valley speedruns and stuff. I think that still counts as like competitive like esports,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, this is kind of the beauty of it. Just play what you like to play and then consume content around what you like. And then you're going to naturally fall into like just watching esports. Doesn't need to be complicated or cost any money, really.
Yeah, definitely. Low barrier to entry, right?
Normally $0 to entry.
Yeah.
You don't need NFL Plus or YouTube TV. You just watch for free on Twitch.
Yeah. You don't even need friends. You can be alone. And just, you need friends, honestly. That could be how you make friends.
Yeah,
playing
there
video
you go.
games.
Honestly, Evan and I have made a bunch of friends like playing video games that I've still never met in person.
I've met a couple of them in person through video games that Paul's talking about.
Yeah, and I think that it's a good way to like keep in touch. Like as someone who doesn't message people if I don't see them on a regular basis, but like Evan and I and like a bunch of people from college, like we'll just play video games and it'll be like a good, easy way to catch up.
I have a friend who's found a girlfriend in League of Legends. They even met in person, and they dated for like 2 years, I think. Yeah,
Okay.
They were like very serious, and that was just through League.
Well, that's the best elevator pitch I've heard so far. You may
If
as
you're
well
alone,
just
go
find
play
love.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It is cool too, right? Because I think it's like why people like watching regular sports is I think it's fun seeing someone who's so much better at something that you think you could be good at. Is like the simplest way to put it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I mean, I'm sure people like to watch sports that they aren't good at or have never played, but like I basically only watch baseball because like I love the sport and it's great to see it at a level that I don't think I could ever obtain.
Mm-hmm.
And just like seeing like how much better people can be. So I think it's like the same with video games, like whether it's like competitive esports like League or like Evan was saying, like speed runs in like Mario or Stardew Valley. Like it's just cool to see what people can come up with that you would never have thought of.
Yeah. It's also one of the beauties of esports is that like, you can like it's a lot easier to try to emulate at least what these players are doing. Like you see these players like professionals do something crazy, right? You're just like, oh, I'm gonna try to do that in my own game, right? But like, and that's just
try.
kind of like, yeah, you can try, right? But that's kind of just like my hands doing things, right? But like, I see Steph Curry do a full court shot, right? I can't just go to a basketball court and start whipping out full court shots. At least I can. Maybe you guys can, but like, like the odds of me doing that are practically zero without like years of training at least just to hit a full court shot. But then with video games, it's kind of just like jump into it, give it a shot, and it's like I'm probably still on my computer watching the thing, so I just stay seated, sedentary lifestyle.
Yeah, might as well practice. Evan, any plugs, either personal content creators you like, any pieces of media?
Yeah, shout out Paul and the rest of my high school friends for doing esports with me back in high school. That really got me into it, basically. Yeah. If you want to watch, I don't know if this will come out in time, but if this does, the League of Legends World Championship is happening right now. Finals are in London. If anyone wants to go to London with me to go watch the finals, hit me up.
Good plug.
Yeah, hit me up. Well, we'll have a good time. Just live in London. If you want the easy way to get into League through a content creator rather than the official streams on YouTube or Twitch, there is Kadrill that Paul mentioned. I think he's an easy way to watch. Yeah, and shout out just playing video games. Honestly, just go play video games. I don't know. That's not really a plug. I'm just telling you. If you're listening to this, go play video games. Doesn't matter what. Play what you like.
Awesome. I absolutely love it. Evan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. That was great.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the This Week I'm Into podcast, and a huge thank you to Evan Peng for sharing his passion on esports. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for the next episode, please reach out at thisweekiminto@gmail.com, and please give us a follow on Instagram at thisweekiminto. Please rate us 5 stars and share this episode with a friend. We're doing our best to grow the podcast, and your help really goes a long way. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Hey everybody, instead of an ad this week, what we wanted to do is give you a little bit of a primer into the League of Legends World Championship Finals that Evan and I talked about on the episode of the podcast. The League of Legends World Finals is happening this Saturday, November 2nd, and the teams in the championship, which we might have mentioned in the episode, ended up being BLG and T1. Unfortunately, this is not what Evan and I had predicted, but we wanted to give you a little bit of info about the team, so if you decide to watch, maybe you'll understand some of the storylines and be able to enjoy it a little bit more. I'm not going to go into much about the actual game, so if you want to learn how the game actually works, I would just recommend looking up a quick video on YouTube. So the first team, BLG, or Billy Billy Gaming, is Chinese first seed who won their most recent regional championship in the LPL to become the first seed from China in Worlds. They've been a top team for the last year or so, and this year they brought in a new mid laner from the other best team in China, and that mid laner's name is Knight. Knight's probably one of the best players in the entire world for the last couple of years, and he is also on a team with their top laner, Bin, who has also been one of the best top laners in the world for quite some time. As Evan had mentioned on the podcast, this is huge for Chinese viewership for there to be a Chinese team in the World Championship, and some of their success may really promote the league going forward if they're able to do it. Something that's really important for that team has been and Knight, as well as most of the other people on that team, have never actually won a world championship despite being some of the best players. So they'll be looking to take down T1, who have been known as the Chinese LPL killers, and just had a great track record against those teams. On the other side is T1, or SKT Telecom, that has become T1, is one of the most winningest teams in all of League history. They're actually the reigning champions of Worlds from last year, but since 2013, they've been to 7 World Finals and won 4 of them, all with their mid laner Faker. So this could be his 5th, which would be completely unreal in the grand scheme of things. They've actually had the exact same team for the last 3 years, which is super rare to have the same roster, and they've gone to the finals with them every single year, losing that first one and then winning last year. Their team's known to have some crazy champion picks compared to the rest of the league, and you'll see that in their top lane and support roles by Zeus and Keria respectively, so it should be a really fun game to watch. No matter what, with these two titans clashing. So even though Evan and I's predictions of who would be in the game are wrong, it should still be a great World Finals. If you're interested in tuning in, I'd recommend either going to the Riot Twitch and YouTube streams, or if you're like me, I watch Kadrill's co-streams on Twitch, and that'll start around 10 a.m. Eastern or 7 a.m. Pacific. And there's normally a really cool opening ceremony that I would recommend, and the game should start shortly after. So hopefully that inspires you to go watch that, and I hope you enjoy the games.